Добрий день, шановні гості. Сьогодні у нас відбувається захід по соціальних інноваціях та інклюзивному дизайну між Норвегією та Україною. Рік назад ми зустрічалися на аналогічній події, тільки офлайн, і відповідно там обговорювали питання і мостів, і інновацій. В цьому році ми будемо говорити про зелені інновації, інноваційні заходи, які можна реалізувати на місцевому рівні, більш широке розуміння стосовно того, що таке інклюзивний дизайн та як він впливає на громадськість, розвиток, університети та, власне, суспільство в цілому. Також ми будемо говорити про ті проекти та як можна їх реалізувати в майбутньому. Цей захід проведено регіональною агенцією розвитку, Національним університетом водного господарства та природокористування, університетом тоді з Києва, майстерною міста з Рівного, торгово-промисловою палатою та університетом Осло-Мет. Зараз я буду говорити про першого нашого гостя Олександра Вацько, заступницю посла Королівства Норвегії в Україні. Отже, пані Олександро, щиро запрошую вас. Всім добрий день. Дуже дякую, що ви запросили мене сьогодні на цей другий форум. Мені сказали, що представники посольства Норвегії були кілька разів в Рівне. І, чесно кажучи, мені сказали, що між Норвезьким посольством та Рівненською областю є хороша співпраця склалася, тому я би дуже хотіла до вас приїхати, як тільки буде час. Хочу подякувати за те, що сьогодні ви нас зібрали разом для того, щоб ми могли обговорити важливість соціальних інновацій та взагалі того, яким чином ми формуємо наше суспільство. У моїй короткій такій промові я просто хотіла трошки сказати, що в норвезько-українських відносинах є дуже важливою така форма, як сьогодні ми з вами маємо. У Норвегії є дуже хороша історія двосторонніх відносин. Зазвичай вона вся базується і на історичних зв'язках, а також на важливих моментах, моральних аспектах тощо. Україна є також дуже важливим партнером Норвегії. Що стосується України, дуже важливо, у нас відбувається і гуманітарна допомога, і проводяться переговори, і в контексті європейської інтеграції ми дуже допомагаємо. В цьому році Норвегія допомогла Україні приблизно на 22 мільйони євро. Так само мені дуже приємно відзначати, що відбувається ріст співпраці між нашими країнами. Ми бачимо, що навіть інвестиції, які Норвегія вкладає в Україну, постійно зростають. Також нам дуже важливо, що також ми вкладаємося і в смарт-технології, зокрема транспорт. Працюючи з місцевими партнерами, ми можемо досягти багатьох. Ми намагаємось це робити, власне, за рахунок проєктів, вкладаючи в транспортну систему України. До речі, один з проєктів, власне, відбувається в Рівненській області. Ну, і також ми можемо сказати, що є велика зацікавленість саме в тому, щоб також розвивати міський транспорт. Ми дуже сподіваємося, що ми зможемо ще більше поширити вплив Норвегії в Україні та в регіоні. Я вчилася в Каліфорнії особисто, і я можу сказати, що ми там вчили саме, яким чином інновації впливають на наше суспільство та на його розвиток. Ну, я впевнена, що ви чули про норвезьке підприємництво. Ми вміємо створити унікальну екосистему для підприємців, коли співпрацюють всі разом, коли підпрацює і уряд, і дослідницькі інститути, і підприємці, власне. Мені здається, що ви можете так само звернути на це увагу і зрозуміти, наскільки важливою є така трьохстороння співпраця, коли в нас є зокрема і освітні установи, тому що вони можуть розповісти про те, яким чином привнести ці всі інновації, але разом з тим і самі соціальні інновації, вони можуть нам забезпечити стабільні, екологічно стабільні можливості для суспільства. Я також бачу те, що вкрай важливим у питаннях розвитку на місцях є людський капітал. Без людей ніяких змін не відбудеться. Ми знаємо, що у великому масштабі жодні зміни не можуть відбутися від складу людей. Ну і цей рік насправді був дуже для нас важливим, дуже складним. Але я особисто вірю, що коли ми зустрічаємося зі складностями, ми вчимося якось їх проходити. Ми можемо сприймати всі ці складнощі всього лише як можливість. І я, власне, так і бажаю, щоб сьогодні всі учасники змогли побачити ті можливості, які перед нами, поділитися своїм досвідом. Я 100% впевнена, що ви є талановиті і зможете досягти великих успіхів. Дякую вам за увагу та всім класно провести час. Олександро, я вам також дякую за вашу промову. Та я дякую за той внесок, який вносить і посольство Норвегії, і норвезьке суспільство, і Норвезька торгово-промислова палата. Дуже вам дякуємо. Зараз я хочу надати слово Сергію Гембергу, заступнику голови Рівненської обласної державної адміністрації. Пане Сергій, прошу вас. Отже, перше, я хочу сказати вам, вітаю вас в регіоні. Хочемо подякувати. Він не працює, перепрошую. Зараз працює. Ну, ще раз доброго дня. Перше, я хочу передати вітання з Рівненської області. Ми дуже щасливі продовжити нашу дружбу та нашу співпрацю, яка є між Норвегією та Україною.
Almost for Ukraine, yes, and Norway, to share our experience, to share our knowledge and innovation between universities on both sides, for businesses, and we are glad to welcome you and see in our beautiful city and region. Thank you so much. And I want to give a floor for the rector of our university, Viktor Mushinsky.
Thank you so much. Dear organizers, dear Norwegian colleagues, dear Ukrainian colleagues, and our colleagues all over the world, it's really a great honor to take part in this conference for us next time over and over again. I would like to tell you that it's simple enough to gather people, but much more important to make him to work together. That's great words. Essentially, that's my words. Really, it's very many people try to together for create something new. To create something new, efficient, and great systems, especially in education, innovation, and in other related spheres and matters. But very seldom they take it and obtain their good results. Because of they don't operate properly. But I'm sure that we operate very properly this time, because we are right place and right time. So I wish all participants of this meeting, of this conference, good successes in our very important and very hard way. So good luck.
Thank you very much, Victor. So right now I want to introduce our first speaker from Norway, Ådne Aasland, senior researcher at Norwegian Institute for Urban and Regional Studies, Oslo Metropolitan University. So, can you hear us? Odne? We can't hear you. We can't hear. Can you unmute it, please?
Yes.
Yes,
can you
thanks.
get my presentation on the screen? Is it
Yes,
possible to see it?
of course.
Great. Шановні колеги та друзі, я дуже радий брати участь у цьому форумі. У мене дуже хороші спогади з минулого року, коли я вперше відвідав Рівне. Тепер я з нетерпінням чекаю кращих днів, коли ми зможемо побачитись знову. Я буду робити свою презентацію англійською мовою, оскільки мені ще потрібно краще вивчити українську.
Okay.
Those of you who listened to my presentation last year might remember that I spoke about citizen participation at local level. And this year I will be more specific and concrete. I know that you recently had local elections in Ukraine, and that the elections turnout was not particularly satisfactory. So the question we discussed last year remains: how do we make people more engaged in local politics? Of course, there is no quick fix to this problem. My focus now is not on the elections, however, but on how to engage people in planning processes between the elections. There is much research that gives evidence that such participation improves decision-making, and that both citizens and politicians will be better informed about each other. And it can give more legitimacy to the authorities' decisions, and it can foster social inclusion. So in this presentation, I will particularly focus on the social inclusion aspect. How can local authorities, with the help of innovative methods, engage and obtain input from different groups of the population, including those who do not normally participate in public meetings and local politics, such as immigrants, young people, homeless people, and groups of the population with few socioeconomic resources. And the focus is on citizen involvement in urban planning. Next, please. So how then can we make people participate more? Obviously, if authorities conduct really bad policies, people will eventually go out in the streets and protest. This is one form of participation, but obviously not the kind of participation that we seek now. In this presentation, I will give examples of experiments with some new forms of participation that firstly aim to involve more citizens in urban planning, and secondly, especially those who are less likely to participate in dialogues with authorities, but who are still affected by their policies. I will give 3 examples, 2 from Norway and 1 from a different Scandinavian country. You will soon see which one. Next, please. In a Norwegian handbook on how to involve citizens in local politics and planning, there is some good advice about how to plan for participatory processes. They might seem obvious, but I still think it is worth emphasizing them ahead of the planning process. First, the authorities have to be clear about why they wish to involve citizens in the planning process. What is the goal of the citizen involvement? It is also important that the reasons are clearly communicated so that people understand what is expected from them. Apart from why, one needs also to define who should be invited to participate. Should it be open to anybody, or should it be those who are most affected? For example, if the goal is to plan for a new playground, should it be parents and children in the neighboring area that should be invited? Or should one aim to involve those groups of the population that it is normally not so easy to reach, so, who are otherwise not heard and who do not participate in other arenas? Or again, should one try to involve a representative sample of the population, for example, to make quotas of different population groups? And finally, one has to decide when in the policy process citizens should be involved. Should it be to get new ideas from them? Then it makes sense that you involve them at an early stage. Or do you require input in the implementation phase? Then it makes sense to involve them at a later stage. Next, please. The theme of today is specifically innovative forms of citizen involvement. I think you would all agree that innovation has to do with creativity. When it comes to innovation in innovative urban planning, such creativity would in particular involve the following three characteristics. Next. Being open to new ideas and approaches that are sensitive to today's socio complexities. Next. Social innovation, experimentation, and collective learning in dealing with people's needs and aspirations. And third, next, approaches and practices to include and empower those who are not, but should be involved in planning processes. Next. Or, as I think has been nicely put by Abdelila Handouch, it has to do with bringing imagined futures into being. So how then can one release such imaginative and innovative activities? This is where experiments come in, trying, improving, learning, and trying again. So perhaps you now expect to get a ready-made recipe from the three examples that I'm going to give as to how successfully engage citizens in urban planning processes. And I'm sorry I have to point you. As you will soon see, challenges facing different cities are very different, and their resources are different, cultural codes are different, and in other words, the context for the experiments will be different, which needs to be taken into account. Since I have worked with local governments in Ukraine over a number of years, I know that you also experiment with new forms of citizen participation. And I'd like to hear more about them in the discussion later. So I'm not saying here that the Scandinavian countries have more or better forms of participation, but I think it is interesting to share experiences, which I believe is also the aim of this seminar. So, can you go to next? I hope that the examples I'm going to give can inspire some creative thinking in your own city. The city you see here is, next please, it's located in the northern part of Norway, and it is Tromsø. Maybe some of you know this city. And the example I'm going to give is about the participatory experiment of visioning the future. Tromsø has been one of the fastest growing cities in Norway for more than 30 years, and we see depopulation in many other parts or rural parts of Norway. This city has actually grown. Growth has been followed by an intense transformation of the urban landscape. The project that I will tell you about now took place as part of a formal planning process related to a municipal master plan. So how could one invite citizens to think about and plan the future of the city? One of the aims of the project was to explore new methods of participation, and here you see a multiplicity of methods that were used to get citizens involved. There were public meetings, philosophical conversations, city walks highlighting local heritage, cultural events, workshops, democratic cafes, seminars, exhibitions, and interactive website. Next, please. Here I want to stress only a few, and I will start with the interactive website. People got the message where they were asked, do you have an idea, dream, or opinion about the future of Tromsø? Share your views here. And then the web address. This was a digital platform of communication that used interactive mapping technology, and it allowed citizens to post their views and suggestions to improve their city online on a virtual map, which they then could use and access from this invitation. And I still think it works. Others could read and comment and vote for and persuade others. A summary of the ideas was then published in an open exhibition. And a second experiment was to organize workshops with youth. One of these focused on architecture, where school children were introduced to thinking about the future through architecture. And the other workshop was a documentary film project where youth were engaged in thinking of the future of their city through filmmaking. Also, pop-up art and cultural events were used actively in the process. In this way, instead of just listening to and speaking, people could also visualize the potentialities of their city. Next, please. Was the project successful? In many ways, yes. The fact that they had many different approaches helped to increase the participation of different groups, especially young people. Another achievement was that people got engaged in doing planning through architecture, walks, cultural events, filmmaking and mapping, instead of just sitting and listening and discussing at meetings. Some of these methods that they found particularly fruitful have become standard methods of Tromsø's planning toolkit, especially involving the culture department in the city administration to use various cultural events and art to make participation more interesting for citizens. But the main challenge was perhaps that it is very difficult for people to see a direct connection between their participation and what appears in the later urban plans developed. Evaluators have found that there was a lack of feedback to citizens on how the input was used. Next, please. Now we proceed to a new city. It is not in Norway, and I think many of you will recognize it. Next. Those of you who thought to yourself that it was Copenhagen were absolutely correct. This city doesn't need more presentation. I will present the challenge that they had and what they did to solve it. Next, please. Like many other metropolitan cities, there are certain exposed areas that combine poor living conditions, challenging social and physical environments, and services that do not meet the needs of the citizens living there. So the city therefore introduced some so-called area-based initiatives, and these are initiatives for urban renewal, and they address both physical improvements and social activities. So the initiative was partly funded by the state and partly funded by local authorities for a period of 5 years, so you could say it's rather institutionalized. They appointed a local secretariat with typically 4 to 8 people, and they can be architect administrators, geographers, urban planners, and political scientists. The main task is to mobilize local actors to care about their neighbors and their neighborhoods. Next, please. The approach was different from the one that I presented about Tromsø, and here the secretariat went out to the exposed places and interviewed the hard-to-reach populations. They listened to the problems and they proposed solutions. And they noted down the suggestions from these hard-to-reach populations. And later these suggestions were presented in cafe workshops with more active local citizens. In this way, the suggestions of the hard-to-reach population were subject to further discussion. Another method that was used is design thinking, using prototypes of urban installations. For example, they used the full-size prototype of a garbage collection station on the spot with temporary and cheap materials. People could see with their own eyes what it would look like and give comments and feedback to the urban planners who were present. Next, please. If we again look at the outcomes, the initiative succeeded in reaching out to groups that are otherwise difficult to reach. Even though the whole process is top-down, since it is initiated and led from the top, it kick-started bottom-up processes by engaging different segments of the population and by taking the discussions out in the street. The challenge was that the cafe tables and the discussions just had an advisory function. Decisions were taken elsewhere, and many good suggestions were not taken into account, which led to quite a lot of frustration among the participants. Again, there was a lack of communication about how the various input would be handled, and the feedback given to the citizens. Next, please. The third city is perhaps one you have not even heard about, I don't know. It's called Kongsvinger. Next. And here on the map you can see where it's located. This is a rather small city. You could perhaps even call it a town with 18,000 inhabitants. Next. What kind of problems did this city have? First, it has an aging population. Many of the young people moved to more central areas. So the authorities needed to find out how to make it attractive for young people to live in the town. Also, there is a road system that needs upgrading, and they wanted to bring new life into the rather dead city center. What did they do here? They established a city laboratorium, City Lab, or Bylab as it's called in Norwegian, which would work on a development strategy towards 2050 that would deal with all these issues. Who were involved? From the authority side, it was both the municipality and the regional county authorities, but also national authorities, since they are responsible for some of the main roads. Civil society and private actors also involved. It was especially seen as necessary to engage young people, but also other segments of the population. So they introduced some innovative methods. Next. First, they started with a kick-off conference where interested people from the whole city could participate. Next. They continued with special workshops for different segments. I will not go into the details, but focus on how they engage children and young people. On the photo, you can see they have created some signposts where the children could go out in the city and place the signposts on places where they particularly were satisfied with or dissatisfied with, and they also explained why. Next. These workshops were followed up by new workshops where they mixed some of the groups that had previously worked on their own and some other workshops that were open for everyone. Next. But at the very end, I think most importantly, they organized a 1 week, very intense city lab as a combination of meetings in new arenas. It could be visits to different workplaces, politicians' lunch in the pedestrian street, politicians' sofa, where you could actually sit down in a sofa and discuss with the local politicians, collections of written suggestions, taking photos of important places, and so on. And Twitter and social media were also actively used. The City Lab certainly managed to create new arenas and engage people who are otherwise difficult to engage in municipal planning, particularly children and youth. A policy document was developed, and many of the suggestions that had come up during the workshops and this City Lab week were taken into account. Next. However, much of the untidy input, input that was collected in the streets or in the events and in the discussions with the local politicians, if these were taken into account, it did not show in the plan. So this frustrated some of the participants. Next. So let me sum up some of the success factors that we found from all these three examples. First of all, it seems that they worked best where there were concrete issues where citizens were supposed to give their voice, and also that there was a clear purpose with their participation. It also was very useful to have a menu of different participation possibilities to reach different segments of the population, and also to meet the people where they actually are. It could be in the street or in other arenas. At the moment with the coronavirus, maybe it's easiest to find them on internet or in social media. It also turned out that early participation and participation throughout the process is more motivating than engaging people towards the end. And also it's important to think about institutionalizing the measures and to link them to formal planning processes. I think what lacked in all these examples is proper feedback to citizens, it's very important that people see what comes out of the suggestions that they make, and that they can also link that to the planning processes. Next. So finally, I would like to give credits to Toril Nyseth and Toril Ringholm from the Arctic University of Norway and Annika Agger from Roskilde University, because they were behind most of the studies and did the actual field work to evaluate all these case studies. Next. Це все. Дякую за увагу.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And of course, after our speakers, we will have a discussion, and we already have some questions to your presentation as well. Okay, so get ready to answer them as well. Okay, thank you very much. So right now I want to introduce you Світлана Кузьміна, Doctor of Philosophy, docent, Director of the Institute of Philology and Journalism. Svetlana, are you here? Can you hear us?
Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for having us. Dear colleagues and participants, let me introduce Вернадський National University in a nutshell. The university was founded in a difficult time. I can't see my presentation.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And the next slide, please. When the Russian Empire was dying in the throes of a social revolution, Crimea seemed like a peaceful place. Not surprisingly, the Academic Council of Kiev University decided to respond to the initiative of the local community to open their branch in Crimea to read the university. The university started in the autumn in 1918. It located in Simferopol and Yalta. The best intellectual forces of Russian Empire gathered there. There were future Nobel Prize laureates among them. Unfortunately, most of them had to leave Crimea after the victory of Red Army and under the threat of terror. The most famous rector of the university was Volodymyr Vernadsky, the scientist of world significance, the founder of Ukrainian Academy of Sciences. Soviet power transformed Taurida University into a pedagogical institute, after first into Simferopol University. Independent Ukraine returned the university to its historical name. In 2014, we had 16 faculties and 15,000 students. That year, we saw Green Men and Russian occupation began. Ukrainians and Crimea Tatars resisted, but so far without success. So Taurida University had to change its location and leave all its material resources in Crimea. Please, next slides. And the next, please. And the next. And the next, please. The slides show how Taurida University became now. And the next, please. Also. And the next, please. And next. And next. It is a long history how difficult it was to get permission to work in Kiev. Eventually, the university has been operating there in Kiev since 2016. The year we had only 240 students, but now there are 2,500 students studying in the university. Next, please. And next. In 2019, we celebrated 100th anniversary, and we look to the future with optimism and hope. We strive to build open-world university which is able to support civil society and help assert its national identity. As our important challenge, we are aware of keeping the problem of Crimea in the field of view of society, as well as preserving the language and culture of the indigenous people of Ukraine, the Crimean Tatars. And the last slide, please. Thank you, and the next. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Svetlana. And right now I want to present two students from university. And it is Iván Čepai and Alíka Achvledianí, third and second year students of the Faculty of Journalism of Torida National University, with a presentation called Student Platform of Journalism, Defend and Fight for Student Rights. Are you ready, guys, to start? So the floor is yours. Okay, we're waiting for them, so they're already online. So guys, you can start with your presentation. Yes,
so hi everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, presentation.
Ivan, can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. So your presentation will be online right now. Okay, you can start.
So again, hi everyone. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Alíka, and I'm a young student who is studying journalism in Torida National University. As you can see, our topic for today can be best summed up as stand up and fight for student rights. Our organization shares values of code of ethics, Norway stand. So that's what we're going to focus on during our brief time. And now we would like to tell you about our organization, Truthful Reporting, Platform of Journalism Students. So Vanya.
So yeah, my name is Vanya. I'm also studying journalism in Torida National University. And we understand that the road to a new Ukraine with better governance, with less corruption and more trust is linked to some fundamental changes in society. And it can only be done on the basis of values such as honesty, human rights, rule of law. And we want to make these changes with our platform. Next slide, please.
So what is it about? What does it represent? At the core of our organization are Ukrainian young people who are proactive, have a vision of what kind of society we should develop in Ukraine and how we should work towards that vision. It's a community of Ukrainian journalism students who actively investigate, report on problems in Ukrainian society, particularly within the universities. There are many ways to accomplish this. We can create a podcast base for presenting the material in media, or students would text us and we will investigate these problems together, or we would invite them to speak out of the issue. The next slide.
And so we hope that in the future, by doing this work, we will contribute to creating a healthier society in Ukraine based on democratic values. Next slide, please.
One of our main goals is to reach out to both male and female students from many Ukrainian universities. The next one.
So we want to reach out to both female and male students from all the Ukrainian universities. Next slide, please. And we want to bring the students together in order to maintain cooperation and work towards the student rights policy. Next slide.
So, what do we include in the sphere of student rights? There is gender and racial equality, freedom of speech. Our goal is to maintain healthy dynamics between students and professors, create a safe space for individual expression. Safe space means that the students could speak out when they feel like their rights are being violated, so the general public could hear about what they stand and aim for. Next one.
So one of the big reasons why we came up with this platform is that we can work towards investing equality in educational places, such as universities. And we're also willing to make the issues of Ukrainian youth a public interest, because student life is not covered in our media. And we want to bridge that gap between the students and the general public so that we can better understand what the students are going through, what they hope for and believe in. And in that way, we can make our society a little bit healthier for everyone. Next slide.
And now we have something for you guys. Recently, we announced about new contest. The task is to create an activity plan for our organization. So, what is an activity plan? It's a list of steps that our platform will maintain in future. And who can participate? Any young Ukrainian team consisting of 2 to 5 members can participate. The award would be cash prize and diploma. And what we expect from you if you decide to take part in the contest. The next one. After that, the next one. So Vanya, tell more about the activity plan.
Vanya, can you hear us? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the contest?
Yeah. So basically, any young Ukrainian team consisting of 2 to 5 members can participate, and the awards would include cash prizes as well as diploma. Next slide, please. So basically, what you need to do as a participant is to come up with activity plan, which is your own vision of the future of this platform, how you want it to develop and grow. Next, please. So if you have a team of young students and you're interested in this idea, you can just register by filling out the form, and then the organizing committee will check, go through works of students and select the best ones. And so that's all we wanted to tell you about today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys, for your presentation as well. And right now I want to introduce our friend from Norway. It is Amund Mikkelbust, coordinator and initiator of various projects between Norway and Ukraine. So right now you will hear a very interesting story from Amund. So Amund, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Amund.
Today, in 2020, we have a situation that is filled with problems and difficult points. I can mention COVID, I could mention many other things. But if we can go back 1,000 years, let's go think about the year 920, 100 years ago, few hundred years ago, and think about the society, the respected Ukrainian society, Kievan Rus. It was a European state. It was respected, and it was absolutely an important partner for many, including the Scandinavian countries. Next one. So let's imagine that we could follow a group of Vikings from western part of Norway and see them come to Kievan Rus, to Rivne actually, and there they would meet many Vikings who already lived there with locals. And next, please. And my point is actually the family relations. Norwegians and Ukrainians can understand each other quite well. And the roots are back in Kievan Rus. So this blood connections is a good fundament for building a good future. Next one. And this is actually from last year's event. Next one. I would like to ask everybody to think about the last presentation from the students in Taurida National University. Let's think about what they are planning, and let's see what we can do to support and help, because surely needed changes in today's Ukraine must come from the young generation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Amund. I do remember like 1 year ago when I was responsible also for meeting you and for giving you like an excursion for all of you guys here in Rivne, and also we were talking a lot about like our cooperation, about our like rich history, yes? So I hope we will try to implement everything what we had like before in history in our nearest future as well. Okay, thank you very much, Amund. So right now, finally, I want to introduce our like second already speaker from Ukraine. It is Roman Zinchenko, an expert on energy innovation and green business, co-founder of the Ukrainian Energy Innovation Network, Green Incubator. And we will talk about possibilities of creating green innovations for global markets in Ukraine. So Roman, can you hear us? And the floor is yours.
Roman? Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great pleasure meeting some of you. Do you hear me?
There are some technical problems, I think, maybe with internet connections.
Just 1 second.
Yes. I think the internet speed is a little bit too slow, or there are some problems with Wi-Fi or connection.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, hope this is better network. So it's great pleasure being among friends. Amund, long time no see. Hope I can someday take you for some beautiful sirnik in Kiev, and your idea of the connection between Vikings and Kiev Rus is really exciting. And I want actually share with you a little bit about of outcomes from one visit Amund was coordinating. And Amund, thank you for inviting me there, if I'm not mistaken, 4 years ago. So I would dare to dream about Ukraine becoming the growth point for sustainable products and sustainable production and green entrepreneurship. Greencubator, the organization I'm privileged to represent, is serving the clean tech ecosystems and eco-innovators for 11 years. And one of the positive signals we see now is the ability and availability of new markets for green products. Why I have this inner feeling for this direction? Well, these are political science. These are primarily policies, and there are two players who already announcing these plans on the large scale, and there are a number of players who are committed to making this happen. So, if we are speaking about the what will be driving the global green markets, there are two international forces: European EU Green Deal would be important recovery driver for EU economy, and it has a lot of positive promises for the green technologies development. On the other hand, American political transformation has a chance of, again, the United States being one of the leaders in the global climate protection movement. So the President-elect Joe Biden has announced $4 billion stimulus pack, which means the global market for clean technologies would be growing. And while we mentioned European Union, we mentioned the United States, but historically, for over the decade, for many years, Norway is also one of the important players in terms of sustainable investing, in terms of phasing out fossil fuels, in terms of taking investment approaches which are helping companies and which are helping municipalities and countries to take green turn. So what does it mean for Ukrainian companies? Primarily, I would love to focus a bit here on the national wealth building. And we are connecting now two countries where export used to be the major driver for the national wealth building. So the exports of the energy resources plus those amazing gifts from the sea became a foundation pillars for the growth of a Norwegian economy, if I understand the economic history of Norway rightly. In Ukraine, we have a different model, but we were also involved with many carbon-heavy industries, including metal exports and other things. What's driving Ukraine's economy growth currently? This is another large export sector, and this large export sector is the sector of software services and technology services outsourcing, and it's one of the most dynamic growing sectors of Ukraine's economy. That's not dominating the economy yet, but still there is a very interesting impact on the creation of the new sectors, including clean tech sectors. Because what we see currently, we see the intersection of the different technology sectors and them being involved with the new ventures in the green fields. So Greencubator is the organization responsible for creating and managing some of the support programs, support models for Ukrainian climate entrepreneurs. And among them are the programs called Climate Innovation Vouchers. So we're responsible for running European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and EU program, providing the funding, the core, the hard technology for major energy innovations, for major climate innovations, for major resource efficiency innovations, which is 1 million euros grant fund for that benefited 26 companies who received these grants. We also provider of knowledge and entrepreneurship education in Ukraine. And what we see now a very interesting intersection between different players. And this intersection is actually some of the ecosystem development efforts coming into fruition. So we see a number of Ukrainian companies who are creating green technologies for the global markets, becoming dynamic export players, and also benefiting from the capital existing in the IT. So let's talk, for example, several companies that got support through our grant programs. So if we are speaking about electrical mobility, everybody's thinking about electric cars. And we are speaking about Teslas, about Nissan Leafs. Some days I had a hobby of counting electric vehicles on the street. Then I got to Oslo, and I stopped counting. There's so many of them. So Norway did a very interesting transformation in terms of switching to electric mobility. Ukraine is one of very dynamic players in this field, because just 2 years ago, Ukraine was 8th fastest growing country in terms of electrical mobility and e-mobility infrastructure. And I'm really happy that we were able to fund the development of core components for the leaders of Ukrainian e-mobility sectors like Auto Enterprise, Toka, Go2You, and a number of other players. So hopefully the coverage for charging infrastructure would soon be comparable with the coverage of charging infrastructure in Norway. And we are already ahead of Poland, we are already ahead of Belarus, and we are already ahead of other neighboring countries. But if we speak about electrical mobility, we can also think about some other segments, because the big player of electrical mobility goes through things not just riding on 4 wheels, but on 2 wheels or even 1 wheel. And I want to share the story about another player. This is the company called Delfast. They were born as electric delivery service in Ukraine, serving Ukrainian e-commerce with 1-hour deliveries. And what they do now, well, just Google Delfast. Delfast is doing record-winning, Guinness prize-holding e-bikes with a range coverage over 300 kilometers on one charge. So what's this company is doing? They're primarily exporting bike to the United States, some EU countries, and they are developing these bikes for new purposes. Not just hobby bikes, they're also cargo bikes, they're also delivery bikes, they're police bikes. They have a program called Green Police, and Green Police is helping Mexican and American policemen patrol their communities, patrol their borders. So we are happy that we provided funding for them to develop the brain, the green heart of the e-bike, the onboard computer, which is controlling charging and all the key functions. And this company is growing. They just recently declared they've reached $2 million of sales, and this is very steep growth for them. Well, the Ukrainian investor, Alexander Sirota, who is primarily a tech investor, was one of the early funders for Delfast. And there are other interesting cases. So, for example, we can speak SolarGaps. And SolarGaps is the company which is turning your window into energy generating asset. And this company won one of the largest EU Horizon 2020 grants. So they got 1 million grant for EU. And we were also funding from them development some of the core electronics and core support for their products. And SolarGaps initial funding coming from the group of tech entrepreneurs, including the founder of IoT Hub, Roman Kravchenko, who is an impressive player in the field of supporting clean tech. We have, for example, the companies who who in the context of COVID, whose experts grew significantly because people are starting to take care more, to pay more attention to ventilation in their places. So a Lviv-based company developing the recuperation technology for distributed ventilation system has grown their sales internationally, and now they're exporting their recuperators to 38 countries. And they're impressive players, and they're developing very interesting partnerships internationally, and they're delivering healthy air to people from United Kingdom to Kazakhstan. And my apartment too, I bought their recuperators, and they're doing their job really well. And automated control, it was funded through the efforts from Greencubator. Well, sometimes ago we were flying. I still hope we will be flying, right? Someday again. But if you are thinking about the modern plane is having 10 to 15% of its weight coming from components made of titanium. Well, titanium is great. This is the great material. This is really impressive material. But what we are missing here in this point, well, just take your iPhone or take your MacBook, and you will see the so-called unibody technology, which means that probably 85 to 90% of the source aluminum for these bodies of this amazing electronic pieces, they were machined out into the dust. Yep. The same is happening with titanium in aerospace. When you are flying the plane, 90% of source titanium was turned into scraps and dust. So Ukrainian company Червона Хвиля has developed the technology allowing them to print the parts for airplanes and satellites on the titanium wire-based 3D printer using their electron beams guns. And they immediately reduced the number of waste of expensive and heavy to machine material titanium by 6 to 10%. And this is huge resource efficiency. Who is behind this company in addition to the amazing team of founders? Well, one of the investors is Mr. Chechotkin, the founder of Amazon of Ukraine, the company called Rosetka. That's amazing, isn't it? Well, also, I'm currently staying in Greencubator's offices, which is located next door above the Ukraine's famous Urban Space 500 restaurant, the second social restaurant, which is channeling its profits into city innovations and into city projects. And a year and a half ago, we were sitting there with the founders of an amazing team called Carbominer, who were at the very early stage conceptualizing their product, helping greenhouse operators to increase their outputs by 30% by pumping up into the greenhouses the CO2. Well, they normally buy CO2, and this is expensive product for them, and that takes a lot of efforts in logistics. So these guys created an interesting project. They just provide CO2 as a service by installing the scrubbers near the greenhouses and selling CO2 directly to greenhouse gas to greenhouse operators 4 to 5 times cheaper. 2 months ago, last year, this amazing company won a first place in the national final for Climate Launchpad and got into top 16 startups globally in the global competition of Climate Launchpad, covering 63 countries. What happened this year? This year they got invested by the famous Ukrainian tech entrepreneur Alexander Kosovan, the founder of the venture capital fund called SMRK and the technology company called MacPo, you might have heard of. So there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of entrepreneurial talent working in different aspects of green industries here in Ukraine. And well, what we see a big challenge, and this big challenge is actually new models. That's not just COVID-19, which is also a challenge, of course, because a number of contracts were renegotiated, suspended, etc. But one of the challenges for Ukrainian businesses are so-called EU carbon border adjustment tax that would be significantly influencing the capacity of Ukrainian companies to export their goods to one of the largest markets. So what does it mean to us? Of course, that's a threat, but that's also an opportunity. And what's the opportunity here? I believe that opportunity is recognizing Ukraine as the best nearshore location for creating sustainable carbon negative or carbon neutral production facilities in Ukraine, and serving the global demand for climate technology and climate positive products which are produced in Ukraine. We have a lot of technologists and engineers and entrepreneurs able to create them already, but what's important is to scale. So I think the concept of bridging between the Norwegian and Ukrainian businesses can also help take on the new markets and take on new opportunities and meet the challenges, and think about maybe this is the good bridge where the capital and the capacities can serve the most demanding and the most attractive markets with products that are green, sustainable, and friendly for the environment. So that's the vision of the Green Incubator, and we are looking forward to continuing the work we are doing. So we are launching a new project called Green Incubator Academy, the ambition to educate new cohorts of green entrepreneurs here in Ukraine. And we are also looking for partners developing new funding models, how to support the creators of green products and green solutions. So I'm sure that Ukraine is well positioned within its region, covering Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, Armenia, maybe Azerbaijan, to become the regional hub for green innovation. This is the first thing. But also we have a good, strong position to become the export hub for developing and producing green technologies and tackling global climate challenges together. That's it. Thank you very much. If there are some questions, I would be really happy to address them.
Thank you very much, Roman. Of course, there will be questions, and we still have one more speaker from Norway, and afterwards we'll have like a discussion, and also I'm seeing like quite a lot of questions already on my phone. So thank you very much. And right now I want to introduce you our last speaker for today's event. It is Anthony George Janeumis, practical researcher, social entrepreneur, equality advocate, Oslo Metropolitan University. We will talk about inclusive design. What is it and what for? Knowledge is a key factor in developing new solutions for people, the planet, and prosperity. These decisions can focus on both policy and practice, as well as empowering disadvantaged communities. So, Anthony, now you can present your presentation. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Beautiful. Nice to meet you guys too. And thank you guys so much for the privilege and the opportunity to talk about this really important subject. Can I just get a visual confirmation that my audio and video are coming through okay?
Of course, it's already on.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so I want to talk today about a really radical and innovative concept called universal design. Universal design is kind of the fundamental basis for approaching inclusive innovation and inclusive design in society. Can you go ahead and advance the slide? So universal design is a radical idea that has only recently come into the kind of public arena. It's an idea that 20 years ago, even 30, 40 years ago, would have been called completely out of the ordinary. It would have been a fringe idea. But today we find that universal design is becoming part of our life, our work, and in the way we operate and conduct ourselves in society. Next slide. And universal design really has a transformative potential to take entrepreneurs, innovators, and academics and kind of pass them through a lens and create more social entrepreneurs, more inclusive innovators, and more action researchers. So universal design provides that lens and really enables these young people and old people alike to take their ambitions and bring them into a more inclusive society. Next slide, please. And it really just comes down to connecting what people are already doing, action research, inclusive innovation, social entrepreneurship, with the reasons why they want to do them, to help the planet, to help people, and to help increase prosperity. Next slide. And I've had the privilege to be able to talk about this topic all over the world. So this is probably the second or third time I've got an opportunity to present this work in Ukraine. And I've presented it everywhere from to human rights lawyers in China, to technology developers in Mozambique, to graphic designers and artists in Uganda. And next week, I'm going to have the privilege to present this work to a group of fashion designers and entrepreneurs in Ethiopia. So this is not something that's necessarily a Norway thing or a Ukraine thing, but it's a global phenomena, and it's something I think that empowers and enables all of us to kind of look at our work in a different way. Next slide, please. Now, universal design is not just a country-specific issue, it's also an issue that has been taken up by some of the highest level UN initiatives. So one of the biggest summits for technology that is hosted in Geneva by the UN's International Telecommunications Union has universal design as one of its fundamental principles. And the way they talk about it is the sharing and strengthening of global knowledge can be enhanced by universal design. So this provides that fundament to kind of how we're approaching the information society, how we're approaching digital technologies, and how we're enabling communities around the world to have access to this knowledge. Next slide, please. And the United Nations has made specific commitments on itself. So it's actually holding itself accountable to these principles of universal design. In its inclusion strategy, the UN says that they will implement and apply principles of universal design in all of their policies and programs. And if you've worked with the UN before, you know that this is not always a frequent thing. They don't necessarily hold themselves to the same level of accountability that they hold their member states. But with universal design, they absolutely have, and they've made a strong commitment towards making this a reality in all the work that they do. Next slide, please. And there's also specific human rights obligations wrapped up in universal design. So there are all of the UN member states, I think but 2, have ratified a treaty called the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And that includes Ukraine, that includes Norway. This human rights treaty has an obligation for states, for national governments, to undertake or promote research and development of universally designed goods, services, equipment, and facilities. And I think this is a really fun juncture to just take a moment, sit back, and think about the fact that right now, this work that we're doing today is in some small way fulfilling our obligations, our national obligations to undertake and promote research and development of universal design solutions. I think this is really important because it's not every day that we get to kind of, sit back and maybe have a coffee or have a drink and think, hey, today I helped my country fulfill its obligations under human rights law. Next slide. And universal design has a very specific definition, and that definition is enshrined not only in human rights law at the UN level, but it's also enshrined in national laws, especially the law here in Norway. So the definition of universal design is the design of, and we can use different terms here, but I like technology. So the design of technology to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. Now, there are 3 really important components of that definition. There's this word design, there's the word usable, and there's the word all people. And I want to unpack each one of those as we go. But ultimately, this definition of universal design just comes down to the fact that technology should be usable. It should be usable by everyone, and that using technology shouldn't require you to kind of try to fix something in this way, or just download this extra piece of software. Or if you just hit it the right way, then suddenly magically it starts working. It should really work right at the moment of purchasing or using. Next slide, Pete, please. Now, as I said, there's three really important key words in the definition of universal design. That first word is the word design. Now, design can be used in a different context depending on the type of speech that you're using it for. Can we go to the next slide again? So if we think about design as, first of all, as a process, we think about the way in which we create something. So universal design essentially becomes a guide for making really hard decisions as you're going through a design process. Universal design can also refer to a product. So when we talk about the design of a product, we're talking about the features and functions of that product. We're talking about the shape of it, the weight, the way it looks, the way it works. And so universal design really comes down to products that we use every day that make life just a little bit easier. And then lastly, universal design, there's an element of universal design that has to do with knowledge. It has to do with your proficiency at understanding these components. And really it focuses on translating that knowledge into action. So when I think about design, these are the three ways that I think about it. And this is the way we've approached universal design when we come to applying that radical idea into practice. Next slide, please. Next key term here is usable, and I think we all have like a fundamental understanding of what usable should mean or could mean. We talk a lot about things being user-friendly or being easy to use. I hear a lot of, or every now and then I hear someone say, oh, that's very intuitive to use, and I don't know if they even know what that means. But usable actually has a very specific kind of set of criteria. Next slide, please. So usable comes down to three key elements, three key criteria. Is it effective? Is it efficient? And is it satisfying? So if we talk about using a piece of technology, can I effectively reach my goal? Am I able to use that technology and do or accomplish whatever it is that I want to do or accomplish? It's kind of a binary. You can either effectively reach your goal or you cannot. The second criteria, efficient, is all about how quickly you can achieve that goal. So how long does it take you to go on a website and book a train ticket? Does it take you a long time because you have to go through a lot of menus and you have to input your credit card details 2 or 3 times before finally you reach your goal? Or is it more straightforward? It kind of takes you immediately to where you need to be and kind of you're able to achieve that goal in a relatively quick way. The last piece of criteria, satisfying, is probably the most complicated but really thought-provoking element of usability. Satisfying comes down to whether or not you're frustrated or angry when you've used a product, or whether or not you're kind of happy, or maybe just content and just purely satisfied. My favorite example here is one that comes from my family. My mom is a very petite to small of stature woman. She grew up in the southern part of the United States where they pride themselves on their politeness. And one day she bought a color printer because she wanted to take it home and print out pictures of her grandchildren, print them out in color. And she was really excited about this because when she prints them out, she puts them on the refrigerator, and it's something that just reminds her of her family. She brings it home and she excitedly takes it out of the box and plugs it in, and she's immediately confronted with all these different menu options and all these screens pop up, and she very quickly becomes confused and a little bit agitated. Several hours later, she got so frustrated with having to try to install this printer that she picked it up and threw it across the room. Now, as I said, my mother's a very petite woman. She's a very non-violent woman. Technology should never drive someone to that level, to that extent of frustration. And I think we've all had that experience at one time or another where we wanted to take our laptop and chuck it out the window, or we wanted to take our phone and throw it across the room. The last component, next slide, of universal design that I want to unpack here is the word all people. On the surface, it seems really simple, right? It's just all of us. But when we really look more critically at what that means, we're really looking at what are called digital divides. Next slide. How am I doing on time? Okay. Okay. No, stay, back slide. There you go, digital divides. So digital divides just come down to the idea that there are certain groups of people, thank you, that have access to and use of technology, and certain groups of people that experience barriers or limitations to accessing and using technology. So we can talk about this in a number of different ways. Research shows that women and girls tend to have lower levels of access and use of technologies than men and boys, and this is an almost universal constant. The rates tend to be diminished depending on the country that you're in, but universally women and girls have lower levels of access than men and boys. People with disabilities tend to have lower levels of access and use of technology than people without disabilities. Older people tend to have lower levels than younger people. People who live in rural areas have lower levels than people who live in urban areas. People with high education have higher levels than low education, income, and it exists across a number of different other dimensions. So the UN has basically positioned itself by saying that universal design is a means for closing some of these digital divides. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. And it's also argued that universal design can be a key component of achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda. Things like good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality can all be facilitated by using universal design principles. Now let's get into that part. Next slide, please. I've had the privilege of being able to do some really groundbreaking research with Harvard University, and what we've basically offered is a series of principles around universal design for the information society. And it comes down to just 4 key criteria that we have to consider when we're putting universal design into practice. Now those criteria are social equality, human diversity, accessibility and usability, and the last and probably most important are participatory processes. Now let's go through each of these briefly, and I can kind of try to start beginning to unpack what they mean. Next slide, please. So when we talk about social equality, what we're talking about is designing technology that everyone can use equally. And this gets into this issue of digital divides, but it also gets into this issue of equality. And again, we kind of all have in our heads what we think equality means, but there's actually a very specific approach, a very cutting-edge approach for understanding how we can apply equality in practice. Next slide, please. So equality comes down to 3 kind of ways of thinking. So what we want is for everyone to have an equal chance for success. Now, when I tell my students that, they immediately say, okay, so then we all get an A in this class, right? And I say, no, 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 no. It's not an equal outcome. It's an equal chance for achieving a successful outcome. And so right now, what we have is that people have different chances for success depending on where they're born, who their parents are, and a number of other different factors. You're kind of born into a situation where you might have a certain level of privilege that was part of who you were from the time you were born. And there are certain conditions where you've been born into a situation of disadvantage, and then your chances for achieving success might be severely limited. So what we need, what universal design basically proposes, is that we can provide supports and we can provide an accommodation, or we can provide the conditions so that everyone has a reasonable chance for achieving success. Next slide, please. Second key condition or key criteria for universal design is human diversity. And that's all about recognizing that people experience a variety of barriers when it comes to participating in society. And a lot of those barriers relate to those kind of digital divides that we talked about earlier. A lot of those barriers relate to someone's gender, someone's sexual orientation, their age, their income, where they live, and on and on and on. Next slide, please. So what that means is, depending on where you are, where you were born, who your parents are, you may end up in a situation where life is just a straight line. It's kind of easy mode, if you want to think of it in video game terms. Where you are and where you want to be is just a matter of doing it. Life may be, because of certain conditions, on medium mode, where you have to overcome some hurdles, you have to overcome some barriers in order to get to where you want to be. Or it may be on hard mode, where it becomes almost impossible to achieve those kinds of successes in life. Now, for medium mode, we can think about things in kind of one dimension. So if you are born with a disability, for instance, you will have to overcome a certain amount of obstacles in your life in order to achieve success. Universal design is about eliminating those obstacles so that you can be on the same level as someone who doesn't have a disability. Now, hard mode is more like if you have a disability, but you also experience some other form of discrimination or disadvantage. This is kind of illustrated with women with disabilities. So a woman with a disability will experience a barrier participating in daily life based not only on her disability, but also on her gender. And so in that way, her experience is going to be different than a man with a disability or a woman without a disability. And so the challenges, the barriers that she has to overcome to get where she wants to be are significantly higher than the challenges of someone who, again, would be just a man with a disability or just a woman without a disability. Next slide. Third key principle here is accessibility and usability. Really comes down to ensuring accessibility and usability for persons with disabilities and everyone. And I explicitly say persons with disabilities here because often they're left out of that conversation of how we can make sure that society is designed in a way that everyone can participate equally. Next slide, please. And I've included both accessibility and usability together because universal design really lies at the intersection of these two ideas. It's useless to make sure that a website is usable for someone if they don't have access to the internet. And giving someone access to the internet doesn't do them any good if they can't use a computer or use a website. We have to take into consideration both accessibility and usability in order for there to be universal design. And that broadens the concept of universal design in a way, because we're no longer talking just about the way software systems are designed, but we're really talking from almost an infrastructure level all the way up to the way software systems are designed in order for us to really capture what universal design is all about. Next slide, please. And lastly, I said the most important component here is participatory processes. What that means is that we have to design, whether it's technology or anything else, in collaboration with key stakeholders and what are called extreme users. So when I mentioned before, a woman with a disability is kind of living life on hard mode, and that's because she experiences barriers because of her disability and her gender. That's what I would define as an extreme user, someone who experiences significant barriers when it comes to accessing and using technologies. Next slide, please. And it's not just about, I get often from my technology students that, oh, okay, well then I just need to test with these different groups at the end. Once I've already created the technology, I'll just do some testing with them. But it's not about only testing. It's about collaboration from the idea phase all the way down into the implementation phase. And I know I've talked a lot about technology here, but this goes for almost anything. Any sustainable development project, in order for it to be truly inclusive, any innovation project, for it to be truly inclusive, will bring disenfranchised communities into the process throughout, so that they're not just being involved at the end after you've created whatever solution it is that you've created, but really bringing them in at an early stage and involving them periodically throughout. Next slide, please. So this is the part of the presentation where I hear in your mind what you're thinking, that Anthony, you are just this eternal optimist, and I love the enthusiasm, but universal design is not going to necessarily solve my country or my community's challenges. And I say, yes, absolutely. Universal design is not a panacea. It's not going to fix equality, the fundamental issues with inequality. It's not even necessarily going to make life good for everyone. But what it is a way that we can nudge society forward, that we can begin the conversation around how to intentionally, purposefully create a world where we can all participate equally. Next slide, please. So I like to say that technology provides the means. Next slide. Universal design provides the way. Next slide. But it's up to us to provide the will behind all of that effort. Last slide, please. And I'd just like to encourage everyone, if you want to connect online and continue this conversation, that would be amazing. I use all of my social media accounts professionally. So please touch base with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can scan the QR code, and that'll take you to my personal website if you want to learn more about all this amazing work. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Anthony, George. And we still have like a half an hour. And right now we have already like a lot of questions that were asked via Facebook and via YouTube channel. So guys, I will try like to announce one by one. And please try to answer them as short maybe as possible, or if you want to add something more, do it. I mean, it's your time. So the first question will be the next one. Good day. In your opinion, is it possible to mobilize the experience of Norwegian civil and responsible society at the local level in Ukrainian communities in the next 5-10 years? What results can be expected from this? Who can answer this question?
I can start.
Okay, Odne, please.
Yes, definitely. I think civil society has become already more active in Ukraine. You can see it from many of the surveys that have been conducted. We did a survey on local participation in 2014, and we repeated it in 2017, and we saw that in particular in terms of participation in engaging with local authorities, participating in various community events and so on, had increased quite a lot. So I think that in terms of participation, Ukraine is on the right track.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one, I think, is for you, Odne. It is, hello, did the discussion in the streets of Copenhagen really work effectively and have some satisfactory results?
Yes, they did work effectively, because the planners could talk to people that they normally do not engage with. So out in the street, you meet people who don't go to the public meetings, and they could immediately see, for example, with these prototypes, they could immediately see the effects of on their local environment. So therefore, they could give feedback directly to the urban planners, which they could take into account when they made the decisions at a later stage. So yes, but not everything was, I mean, many of the suggestions, as I mentioned, were not taken into account, and that frustrated many of those who were more active, who wanted to see their proposals being followed up by the decision makers.
Thank you, Odne. The next one. Good day. We have already heard about what innovative measures are used in Norway to activate local people. But Norway is a more developed country where people who care about the fate of their country or city life. Will these methods be effective within Ukraine? Do Ukrainians consider these problems relevant at all? Thanks.
A good question, because I don't think the differences are that big.
Sorry, Odne, maybe Roman Zinchenko wants to answer it
Okay.
as well. Okay. Sorry, Odne.
That's Odne. Sorry if I was hijacking your answer, but I'm sure you have enough to contribute. So the key challenge for Ukrainians in this segment, in active participation and involvement of transforming some of the well-being components, is actually getting rid of paternalism and having the skill of involvement in the socially important issues and community important issues in very practical and very often monetary way. So we still have some post-traumatic experiences of people not willing to commit and to contribute to some joint efforts, sometimes rather aggressively. But the fruits of joint activities are actually showcasing itself and they're manifesting itself. And we have a growing number of communities where some of the practices mentioned, they're providing very interesting, sustainable, and also financially attractive results. From the condominium developments to the landscape designing and some partnerships between communities and businesses, there are some new experiences. But paternalism is the enemy probably number 0.
Okay, thank you very much, Roman. The next one is question from our YouTube channel, from Megel Marina Evgenivna. What are the most interesting innovations have appeared in Norway now? Anthony or Odne?
Sure, I can respond to that.
Yes.
This work in universal design that the Norwegian government started really back in 2005 is quite innovative. They're really putting forth a new agenda for reforming society from really the bottom up. And I think this sort of, not only the policy innovations that have come out of that, but the product and service innovations that have come out of that have really helped to make Norway a much more inclusive society and empower people who are traditionally left out of the discussions.
Okay, thanks. Next one. Do students from universities in Norway and Ukraine have the opportunity to jointly implement innovative projects? Is it possible only in Kyiv and other big cities, or in small villages as well? Of course, electric cars will not be able to move on ideal Ukrainian roads without the possibilities of recharging, but you can start with a smaller one, sorting garbage, for example. What methods of combating excessive pollution can be implemented in Ukraine? Thanks. Who is eager to answer this question, guys? Roman, okay, please.
Well, I'm the two driving factors. The national policy, which is very often failing miserably in terms of enforcing adequate pollution management. And the second is EU carbon border adjustment text. So a lot of Ukrainian businesses would have to adjust to the new standards of environmental accountability, new environmental standards, to be able to export to some of our largest economic partners. So frankly, I see more like external factors could do better than the national regulation, because the national regulation is moving really slowly. If we will have some type of that law by mid-2021, then that means I'm wrong and I have to apologize.
Okay, thank you very much. The next one. One of the main goals of Taurida National University is to represent people from Crimea. Our task is to save the existence of Crimean Tatar language due to the language being under threat of going extinct. Taurida National University keeps teaching students Tatar language and literature. As we know, Norway has a Sami University, which is working on sharing Sami language. We would be grateful if you could share Sami University's experience with us. Odne and Anthony, can you add something? Or do you know about Sami University and their experience, or maybe some cooperation, or I don't know?
We do have quite a lot of research on Sami issues in our institute, and we also have collaboration with Sami researchers in other parts of Norway, and I think they are very internationally oriented, I would say, so they are very eager to participate in different networks with indigenous peoples, and I will bring forward this message to my colleagues who work on these issues, because I'm sure they would be very interested in collaboration.
Thank you very much, Odne. We'll really appreciate that as well, so we'll keep in touch, of course. The next one. Hello, I'm very interested in which Ukrainian universities do you cooperate with? Or where are our universities, or is this cooperation already existing between like Ukrainian and Norwegian universities? So guys, you have both like a little bit time to answer that, okay? Thanks.
Odne, why don't you start? You've been working in this longer than I have.
Yes, I can start. I have been working in one project since 2008, which involves universities from all over Ukraine. But in the last years, I've been working on a project with Karasin Kharkiv University that is studying regional diversity and how it is accommodated in Ukraine. And we also have partners there from Kiev Mohila Academy and Kiev School of Economics, and also international partners like Freie Universität Berlin and so on. And then I work on another project that Anthony is leading, so he can maybe tell about that.
Yes, so we have a couple of really great Ukrainian university partners in that one. Also Kiev Mohila University and Catholic University, Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. And both have been kind of instrumental, not only for using the opportunity that the project has given us to build capacity, but also to generate new innovations. One of the key businesses that have actually kind of been spun off as part of that project is called Inclusive IT, and it's a Ukrainian business focused specifically on this issue of universal design. So I'd encourage anyone based in Ukraine who has an interest in this work to please check them out. They got a Facebook profile, website, and everything else, and they do incredible work. I just had funded recently an EU project that includes the Kharkiv National University of Internal Affairs. And so we're going to be working with them to build more gender-inclusive innovation ecosystems in Ukraine and across 25 other countries.
Wow, great. So we already have like a big cooperation. Maybe lots of our viewers, they didn't know about that as well. Thanks very much, guys. So next one, I would like to hear the opinion of experts on the Kyiv Smart City initiative. Is it possible to fully implement this project in Ukraine, taking into account all the nuances? Thanks. Maybe Roman Zinchenko can say something, or maybe you know something about that.
Well, that's not quite my cup of tea, but this initiative has interesting concept in the background, and still the implementation bit lacking the perfection. I believe they have a number of components, and what they're currently lacking, from what I know, is the capacity for processing immense amount of data they're generating. So they have data, and one of the important tasks is actually creating the mechanism with the data-driven public management and public administration principles. That still in the making, as to my knowledge, but I might be wrong. I haven't heard from all the leadership from the program for about a year and a half.
Okay, thank you very much, Roman. Next one, I think, to our Norwegian friends. Good evening. And in what areas in Norway is innovative design most used or mostly used?
I can speak to that. So right now, the major places that it's being used is the tech sector. It's being adopted very rapidly by the tech sector. The banking sector has also moved pretty early on this issue of universal design. The only kind of holdouts we've had is with the building sector. For some reason, they've kind of resisted this whole idea of universal design. But I think they've slowly warmed to it, and a lot of this comes down to just trying to retrofit very, very old building. But the ones that I feel have the greatest potential and who kind of gravitate to this concept very, very quickly are the young innovators and entrepreneurs at university and ones coming right out of university. I barely need to introduce them to the idea of universal design, and they already grab it and run with it. And the ones that have been able to take universal design even further than I could have imagined are my colleagues that I work with down in Mozambique and Uganda. The people there, whenever I present this work, they immediately grasp the fundamental principles and they already start integrating it into their work almost without question. And so I'm afraid that a country like Norway, as advanced as we are, in half a generation, in one generation's time, we'll be looking to countries like Uganda and Mozambique and saying, tell us your secrets of how you've managed to put universal design into practice. And I'm sure it'll be the same with Ukraine as well, because I've seen so much amazing work being done in this field in the last 5 years.
Okay, thanks a lot, Anthony. So the next one is quite interesting one. Also for, I think, for our Norwegian friends. Since many people die on the roads in Ukraine, I would like to ask the following. What is the road safety situation in Norway, and does Vision Zero work in this country? Perhaps you would advise that from the Norwegian experience, Ukraine could adapt in the first place. What you can advise, actually? What we can adapt at the beginning to prevent all of this?
I think you can do that better.
Amund, please.
I will use one word, reflex. Then you drive through a Ukrainian street or road, through a village. You see some youngsters, some young pupils from local schools going on the roadside. You can't see them. Mm-hmm. And in Norway, we have reflexes that reflect the light from cars, and such a small thing would absolutely save many lives if introduced to in.
Thanks. It's really innovative and actually quite simple, and I don't think that it takes like too much money or finances as well. Thanks.
Excuse me, even the city could think about the end of year, Christmas, and give a small gift to all pupils in public schools.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Some personal reflex.
Oh yeah, yes, some vests, you mean, or some T-shirts that.
No, some small pieces.
Some small pieces, yes. Sorry,
Yeah.
because maybe I can't hear you.
You can put it on your rucksack,
Okay.
or your jacket.
Okay, that will reflect the lights, and so it will be much more safer for them in our streets as well. Yes, I agree. Thanks. The next one. I would like to get an answer to the following question. Was there any Ukrainian project that inspired you to create a new, unique project in Norway? Thanks in advance. Guys, do you have such examples that you saw, maybe some already implemented projects in Ukraine that inspired you like to create something new in Norway? Yes, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned before this company, Inclusive IT in Ukraine, and what we've been working on now is taking their business model and seeing in what ways we can replicate that here in Norway, because what they've essentially managed to do is to create a sort of system that connects businesses to diverse users to enable them to kind of test their systems and make sure that the design of those systems is such that those diverse users will be able to have the equal access and use of their technologies. And so we're working now to try and find ways of putting that same system into place here in Norway, and we're actually looking at putting it in place also in Poland and other areas of Europe. So yes, I've learned a lot from my Ukrainian colleagues.
Can I also
of course,
an answer?
Course. Yes.
I've learned a lot of research, useful things for my research, and especially in the project that I'm working on now, we do some discourse analysis, where I think that the Ukrainian team has some really good methodology that we are currently trying to implement also in our Norwegian projects. So that's been an achievement for us.
Okay, thanks, guys. Next one. What design innovations have impressed you in the last 5 years? What impressed you most? I don't know. Maybe you have such examples.
Yes, I can bring an example. So one of the companies that I co-run here in Norway, we've been doing quite a bit of work merging the innovation process with the universal design process, so that while we're creating a new solution, we can create that solution in a way that fundamentally adheres to those universal design principles. So I think that procedural element, making sure that the process of design and of innovation is bringing forth new solutions that are universally designed, I think that's been really critical. There's been a critical need for that in the last 5 years. And I think we're just now getting to the point where we have these sorts of process innovations that can hopefully empower innovators around the world.
Okay, thanks. Next one. Do you think Ukraine is ready for such new innovative measures? Maybe Roman Zinchenko, or what do you think? I mean, judging from your personal experience, because I know that you are performing.
I just had a very interesting discussion yesterday on that, and I could just repeat one of the things we were discussing. So the quote is not mine. I just liked it, but I forgot the author. But the thing says the following way: if you're not scared by the moment you're starting the new project, you're doing the wrong project. Your project is lacking ambition and scope, and it's not targeting next level. So that's understanding fear and overcoming fear and targeting the next level is probably the biggest driver for getting innovations happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with the author that we don't know the name, but still, of course, it's very important when we are fearing something, because it is a big challenge and it is also a big responsibility, yeah? Whether it will work or not. Maybe Anthony, you want to add something?
If I met one thing here. So it's just important to take into account the speed of time, and the lives are too short to take on the projects that don't scare you in the beginning, because otherwise you want big, bold challenges.
Yes.
Anthony, sorry.
And I think I'll pick on that exactly, because I think what it comes down to is that it costs no money and it takes no time to change your way of thinking. And I think that's all it comes down to, is starting from a point of, this is how I used to think, and now, because of new information, I'm changing my approach, I'm changing the way I think about these issues. And whether you have the resources right now or even the time right now, that's not as relevant as changing your approach, so that when those resources do come into play, and when that time does come into play, then you're able to kind of execute in a way that fulfills those ambitions.
Yes. And now we still have like 4 minutes, guys, but we still have 1 or 2 questions, and quite interesting one. Why you are cooperating with Rivne, and why Rivne, actually?
Rivne is amazing.
Very nice city, yes. But actually, I think the guy who is responsible for why we started to collaborate with Rivne, not that we do it now, because now we have already developed good relations. It was Amund who took this initiative. So thanks to him, we started up in Rivne, and we want to continue meeting you.
Yeah, and I think not only Rivne, but also Torida University and a lot of other cities in Ukraine, and maybe villages as well, and NGOs and universities, of course. So Amund, you are one of the biggest Ukrainian friends, and you're always welcome to come to Rivne, to Kiev, to our universities in the whole Ukraine. So thank you very much as well. Can you add something, please?
Yeah, I think it's not one person, it's the cooperation. And Rivne is an interesting city, interesting institutions, interesting administration. Thinking about the new administrative center where people go in, you don't have the small offices where you sit with one person responsible, but everybody can see everybody and follow the actions there, and of course less reasons for small gifts.
Okay.
And just finished with the example of small reflex.
Okay, great. So we already have like it online. So
it's
yeah,
common use in Norway.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, Roman, 1 minute, please.
If I may chime in here. So from the number of friends who are actively working to develop Rivne or located there recently, I can see that city is actively getting the ramping up the dynamics and the pulse. So being in Kiev, I can hear the pulse from Rivne, and I'm often on the phone with some of those who are driving changes. So probably early next year should be coming to again see Rivne.
Thank you very much, Roman, for participating, of course, and for answering all of that questions as well. Also, I wanted to say a big thanks to our translator, Tatiana Simchuk. All the Facebook viewers and listeners could hear her professional translation through these 2 hours. It's a very big, titanic job, so thank you very much, Tatiana. And I also want to thank you everybody who was participating in our event, and I hope we will find some new challenges for Ukraine and for Norway, and we'll find like joint projects that will be implemented as soon as possible. And of course, I hope that we try to focus on the social innovation and inclusive design, and also green technologies and innovations that are already implemented and will be implemented in Ukraine. And thank you very much, all of you. and my name was Mykola Dedovets. And guys, I hope we'll see all of you soon, like here in Rivne or in Kiev, and offline, of course. And the vaccine will be, and we will be healthier, we will be happier, and the planes will fly, like Roman Zinchenko mentioned in his presentation, yeah? And we will all gather together and we'll try to do as much as possible and to contribute more in our future. Thank you very much. So take care and stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.